How do you identify talent that can go from being a project engineer to a senior leader in your organization and make a tremendous contribution to the growth of your company? That's the topic of discussion today with my guest, Ryan Aukerman. He is the Executive Vice President of Griffith Company. And we talk about his career journey from project engineer to executive vice president. And he is now slated to take over the role of CEO of Griffith Company when the current CEO retires. And what's very interesting about our discussion is that we lay out how Ryan made progress through his career and how that progress was enabled by the succession planning that Griffith Company has committed to over multiple generations. They're now in their fifth generation of leadership. And so that success is no accident. It's as a result of giving concerted effort to structuring a succession plan and executing a succession plan that enables them to sustain a high level of leadership over a long period of time. So if you have any interest at all in succession planning for your construction company, this interview is for you. Enjoy my discussion with Ryan. And if you need any help at all with succession planning as you listen to this interview and think you may need an outside voice to give you some structure and some ideas and some feedback, feel free to reach out to me anytime on my website, Construction Genius. Thanks for listening to today's show and enjoy my conversation with Ryan. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Ryan, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure. As we kick off, you're getting close to 20 years in the construction industry. Let me ask you, how did you get into construction in the first place?
So my path was a little different than many in our industry, but I wasn't really exposed to construction from at an early age. I didn't have any family that was in construction. So I really didn't have a lot of insight into the industry, but I was going down the road of being an accounting professional. I was going to school to get my degree in accounting. And the company that I worked for at the time had decided to relocate and move back to Ohio, where they were based out of. In between that time, I'd come across a good friend of mine that was in the construction industry and actually knew Jamie Angus, who's our current CEO, and said that they were looking for a project engineer position to be filled. And at the time, I considered, really, I was at a crossroads with the accounting industry, and it really wasn't exciting for me. So I thought, why not give this opportunity a try?
Go ahead.
No, I was saying, so I ended up setting up an interview with Jamie and came in to interview with him, and we just hit it off. He explained what the position was all about. He explained what job I was going to be going to, which was a Long Beach airport project. And I just liked everything he had to say. And I had a feeling that it seemed like a really good fit for what he talked about. And so I gave it a shot and started with the company back in 2004.
It's interesting to me. So put yourself in Jamie's shoes for a moment. He's talking to you. You don't have a CM degree. You're from an accounting background. Why do you think he picked you as to be a project engineer on sounds like a major project there?
Well, I think he saw in me that I was willing to learn, that I had a good work ethic and through our discussion and thought he should take a chance on me, which I'm thankful that he did. And interestingly, in our company, many of our senior executives, many of them do not have construction degrees, whether it be civil engineering or construction management. Jamie, for example, has an aerospace degree. Our previous CEO had a degree in education, and we have many that have business degrees or different kinds of education background.
Let's explore that for a moment then. That's very interesting to me. Why do you think that is at your company that's the case?
Obviously a lot of our senior management has been here a long time. We have a lot of longevity, a lot of long-term employees. So, civil and CM CM probably wasn't really big up until probably the last 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. Civil's always been around, but a lot of the civil engineering students, out of school went into engineering companies. So I think in our company is very family oriented, where a lot of folks that came into the company started out in the field as laborers or operators, and then worked their way up in the company into management roles, and then so on and so forth. So I just think we've had so much success bringing people in from other industries, and just the ones that have that good work ethic, that ability to learn, ask questions. We we're not set on only pulling from those CM or civil engineering backgrounds.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So it's that combination of good work ethic and openness to learning.
Correct.
What do you think the advantage of not necessarily pulling from construction management is in terms of the way that your company operates, if at all, if there is any advantage there?
Well, there is, and we have a pretty robust internship program and primarily pull from construction management and civil engineering students.
I see.
And the advantage of doing that, obviously, is they've either been exposed to early on, they have a passion to be in the industry because that's the career path they've chosen. And then it's just us teaching them all the things that they don't learn in school. So there is an advantage of starting with that background. And then, starting at a very young age really allows us to mold them. I didn't start, until, again, I switched career paths in my late 20s. Okay. So those students coming out of school that are in their early 20s, they have a few years advantage of building a long-term career and really being really talented construction professionals.
That's awesome. So why did you pick Griffith specifically as the company you wanted to work for?
Well, it just was the opportunity that arose in front of me at the time. I hadn't been exposed to construction. I'd never given it a lot of thought because I didn't have any knowledge about it. So it was really just the right place at the right time. And once I joined the company, I've never really considered any other construction companies. Griffith offered everything I was looking for in a company: family atmosphere, small company culture, employee owned. It just seemed like the right fit for me. And I just felt really fortunate that I was able to find it on my first try with construction.
That's cool. So you started as a project engineer, and then you kind of worked your way through being a project manager and assistant regional manager and a variety of different positions up to where you are now as the executive vice president. Take me back to when you first took on a formal leadership role. What were some of the struggles that you encountered?
So as I moved my way up in the company through those positions that you mentioned, my first real shot at leadership would have been, as a project manager and managing a project and managing a team of engineers underneath me. And the biggest struggle that I've had in my career and being in a leadership position is really managing other people. Having other people, getting them to follow you, getting them to do what you need them to do, to be able to delegate to them and want to follow what you're telling them to do and really believe in what you're telling them is really key. And, as we all know, human nature is an interesting thing. Everyone's got different personalities. Everyone has different things that motivate them with the work that they do. So really figuring out that challenge, how to decipher how people work and how to get them to, again, do what you need them to do underneath you to be successful as a team is really a challenge, but it's a lot of fun figuring out as well.
What did you find, as you began to be a project manager leading those engineers, what were some of the mistakes that you made at first that you thought, I really need to change that and take a different approach?
I really at first took a one-size-fits-all approach. So I thought if I give someone kudos for doing a good job, it was going to motivate them. I thought it would work for everyone. I thought if, from a discipline standpoint, if they didn't do something or didn't hit a deadline, then the way that I would coach them or try to correct that behavior, I realized that it was different for different people. So trying to figure out, again, what works for each individual is key. And actually, getting to know them outside of just the job that they're doing for you. But, what are their hobbies? What is their family life? What makes them tick in life? And then trying to tie that in really helped me overcome those early mistakes that I made by just looking at them as an employee and not really looking outside of that.
Interesting. So as you began to build your career, were you taking intentional steps? Did you set a specific goal of where you wanted to get to, or was it just kind of taking opportunities as they came along?
It was a combination of both, Eric. I never said no. Anything that was asked of me, I did. Regardless how I felt about it or if I thought it was a menial task, I knew that everything that was given to me to get done was important and I needed to learn to be well-rounded. So I looked at my peers around me and I just tried to, work longer hours, take on more responsibility, have better performance metrics. I just try to do all of those things when I looked at myself. I'm a really competitive person. So I'm always trying to set the bar high for myself and try to surpass it. But with that, I also made sure that my executive management knew where I wanted to go. I was very forthcoming with that. And I would ask them for advice and mentorship. I had mentorship from our previous CEO, our previous president, and current CEO and president, who I've worked with my whole career, Jamie Angus. I was without overdoing it, I was constantly talking to him and asking him, where I could improve or what steps I could take from his perspective to get into senior management and ultimately someday, told him I'd like to lead the company. before my career is over.
That's cool. So let me ask you this then. What makes the difference between a good mentee and a bad mentee in your mind?
So I've been on both ends. I've been the mentee and I've been the mentor. And to me, a good mentee is someone that just constantly wants to keep learning, wants to take advice, wants to ask a lot of questions. A good mentee reaches out to their mentor because you can't wait and leave it to the mentor to reach out to you. It's your career path. It's you're the one that wants to learn and grow. So a good mentee seeks out that mentorship. A bad mentee on the flip side doesn't. They wait for the mentor to come to them. They don't follow through on a lot of the things the mentor's giving them advice on what they should be doing or things they could be working on. I mean, it's really taking advantage of that because it's, everyone's busy, not just in this industry, but in many industries. And you really got to not take that mentorship for granted and take advantage of everyone and have multiple mentors, not just one.
Okay, so let's talk about that in terms of multiple mentors. Just give me a little bit more about that. If I'm looking for multiple mentors, why am I doing that?
Okay. As I was coming up in my career, I had obviously my internal mentors in the company. I had the executive managers that I mentioned previously, and that they were going to set me or help guide me on what I should be doing in the company, what they were seeing on my performance. And I was obviously looking for critical feedback. Kudos are nice, but I wanted to know what am I doing? What can I improve on? But outside of that, you also need people for mentors, even in different industries. Our business, the construction industry, has been done the same way for a long time. So it's nice getting perspectives from leaders in manufacturing industry and maybe shipping and transportation or whatever industry it might be. I also reached out a lot to some of my key subcontractors. As I was coming up in the business, we're a heavy civil engineering company, but we don't self-perform certain aspects. So I would have a mentor from an electrical company, or I'd have a mentor from a mechanical company that really helped me learn how to, learn those aspects of the industry. As I was focusing on learning what we did within Griffith Company, I was also trying to learn those other aspects that I had to manage, but didn't ever self-perform, on my own.
That's very interesting. So we've got that combination of internal and external mentors, and then mentors both within the industry and outside of the industry. You were mentioning, Ryan, that you were looking for critical feedback. And I know that everyone would agree, yes, give me critical feedback, but sometimes it's really hard to receive that critical feedback, particularly when you actually disagree with the feedback. So as you were building your career, can you think of a time when you initially disagreed with the feedback that you were receiving, but then later on perhaps saw the wisdom in that advice and changed your behavior as a result of that?
Yeah, I do. So an example of exactly when that happened. So early on in my career, I was working on a project out on Ontario Airport. And, when you're out on a project, you feel like you're a little bit distant from the company because you're not constantly interacting with your senior management. You're not in the office. You're really out on the island, so to speak, in the field trailer. So I was out there. I felt like I was working really hard. I was working underneath a very poor project manager at the time. Didn't give me a lot of guidance. So I was kind of, trying to make my way on my own and doing the best that I could. So at the time, my manager came out and we had a discussion about that. And he thought that I wasn't really keeping up on the tasks that I should be. But then again, I didn't agree with that because he wasn't there and I didn't really have the guidance that should have been put in place. But I realized not to argue or combat that, just to take it with open ears and just realize, okay, that's something that I'm being looked at for, and I need to take his advice. And, so later on, I realized, okay, he was just trying to help me. He wasn't really coming down on me for anything. He was just going off of what he knew. And as I looked back on that, I just took that as another opportunity to prove that differently and work on that feedback that he gave me.
That's excellent. So what would you say are some essential qualities for a construction leader?
So essential qualities that a construction leader has to have is patience. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to have a lot of understanding of the people that work underneath you. You have to be a great communicator and teach that to those below, because communication is key, not only in this business, but all aspects of life, in my opinion. You have to be a good mentor and you have to be willing to teach people. You have to be passionate, because if you're not passionate, then all those other things aren't going to fall into place. So you have to be really passionate, not only about the company, the industry, and it really having your employees' minds at the top of your mind to make sure they're successful. So all those things working together really, in my mind, makes a good leader and someone that people want to work for.
Let's go back up to the top then, because I have never heard someone say it exactly like that. You said that you need patience. What do you mean by that specifically?
When I first got into management, the first thing I did a lot of was compare people to me. So I compared people to me, and I would have done it this way or I would have done it that way. And I realized that people learn at different paces. Everyone's got a different work ethic. Everyone approaches things differently. It's not a one size fits all approach. So the patience piece is really trying to understand who they are, what their personality is like, and just realizing everyone learns at a different pace, and putting people in different positions at the pace that they're learning or the skill set that they have is really key. It's like a chess game. You're putting people in the right place with the right skill set. And hopefully you're putting them in a place not only where you think they're best suited for, but also where they're going to be happy and they're going to excel, because happy employees are typically a lot more productive and successful than unhappy employees.
How do you distinguish between people who are lazy and people who don't run at the same pace that you do?
So that's pretty easy for me. If I have to tell someone to do something, more than once or twice, or if I've showed them how to do something once or twice and they still don't grasp it, then I look at that as them just being lazy and not paying attention. Versus someone that I've talked to and I see them trying to pick something up and I don't have to repeat myself more than once or twice. Then I see, you can tell when someone's really trying when they're not. So that's probably the differentiator right there.
Excellent. I know one of the biggest challenges that construction leadership teams have is identifying and cultivating that next generation of leadership. How many generations has Griffith gone through now?
We've gone through 5 generations.
Okay, so I know you know this, but that's pretty remarkable. The number of construction companies who have done that is very, very small. They might get to the 2nd generation, maybe the 3rd, but to get to the 4th, the 5th, and beyond that is pretty remarkable. What do you think Griffith does really well in terms of identifying someone like yourself who comes in as a project engineer and now is in line to lead the company moving forward? I
think that, and we've gotten better at this over the years, and the Griffith family ran the company until the early 1980s. And then in 1982, we became employee owned because the Griffith family didn't want to, you're exactly right. They were 4th generation and they just wanted out of the business. They didn't have the same passion as those before them to continue to run the company. So they decided to carry on the Griffith name and sell it to the employees. So we became 100% employee owned in 2002.
2002.
Yeah. So it took us 20 years to basically buy the company back from the family.
Wow.
And it was actually slated to do it in 10 years, but because the employees that took over grew the company, it took 20 because of the growth. So the ESOP model is very good for an owner. If they're willing to wait to get their payout, it's typically one of the highest returns on investments for a company to go that route. It just takes obviously a little more time to do that. But anyway, as far as succession planning goes, we now have a formal succession plan in place. We're constantly looking at when our senior leaders are going to retire. And we'll look at it 8 to 10 years ahead of time, and we'll start identifying people that we think have the skill set to potentially fill those roles. And we'll start working with them. We have about 5 years ago, we created an emerging leaders program in our company. So that's what that is. We've identified young professionals in the company, and we've started them on a track to educate them on a lot of the things they don't get exposed to about running our business outside of what they get exposure to on running a project or running, an estimate, so to speak. We expose them to the financials. We expose them to the legal aspect of our business. We expose them to accounting piece, just all those different parts, the bonding piece, insurance, all those different parts and pieces that they may not get exposure to early on, so that not only they understand it and they can do their jobs better, but also to see what their aptitude is moving forward. And when we have a senior role open up, that they're ready to fill those roles.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So that emerging leaders program, it has both a technical aspect to it. Do you do anything on the people side of it in terms of communication or conflict resolution, those kinds of things?
Yeah, we have a pretty robust list of things that we teach, that we train them on. But yeah, we do negotiations training. We do, we teach them about what a board of directors is and why it's in place and how the members are comprised. And we do leadership. I mean, we really try to cover the gamut to get them ready for senior leadership. And looking back, when I was moved into a senior role, we didn't have that in place at the time. So I was put into a management position and I really didn't have a lot of formal training on how to be a manager. I kind of learned by drinking through a fire hose. I mean, I just dealt with it as it happened. And I did have mentors that helped me through it. So the first 6 months or a year, what was really tough. And I had to pick up all that stuff as I went along versus, getting exposed to it beforehand.
Okay. So let me explore that with you. Let's say you've identified someone, and this happens a lot of times. I identify someone and I promote them into a role of leadership, or I put them on that track to get to leadership. Why do you think that process fails? What causes failure so the person that I've identified doesn't actually step into that role?
Well, I think part of the process is a lot of times people that want to get into leadership roles maybe don't fully understand what's involved in that. I mean, a lot of times individuals will see, maybe the different perks that they can have. Maybe it's additional compensation, maybe it's more other perks that they'll be able to take advantage of by getting into that role. But they don't realize how difficult it really is, again, managing people, taking on the stress that you take on in a leadership role, the sleepless nights, sometimes the long hours that it takes. A lot of times they don't really see all that until they get into that position. And then a lot of times they realize that it really isn't what they wanted. They thought they did, but they just didn't have enough knowledge going in. So we try to expose them to that and let them teach them that this is what you're signing up for. So really be sure that you want that. We did have, we opened up an operation out in the Inland Empire, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And we did have a person slated for that operation. We put them into that position and they weren't really set up for success in that role. They thought they could handle it. We thought they could handle it as well. We wanted to give them the opportunity. It just didn't go as planned. So we pulled back that operation and we ended up dissolving that group. But we did, until you try, sometimes you don't know. But that was an example of us doing that.
Interesting. What do you do when you have two candidates that are, in your minds, equally qualified? They may be different in terms of their skills and their capabilities, but they're equally qualified, but you only have one seat. How do you handle that?
Well, we typically try to identify 3 people for one seat. And we start soon enough. And it's interesting because you actually have them, they're kind of competing against each other somewhat. Healthy competition, but you want to see who rises to the top. So like you said, if you just pick one person and they don't work out, well, now you're starting back from ground zero. But if you get 3 people ready and they compete for the position and you really see who's the best candidate, and that's who you go with. But it doesn't mean that the other 2 candidates lose out altogether. As we're a growing company, our objective is to have multiple people that are ready to take over management positions. So as we move into a new geographic region, or we move into a new market, or whatever it may be, we now have a bench full of people that we think can move into those roles versus having an opportunity arise that we can't jump on because we don't have anyone to go run the operation. Do
you ever get in a situation where someone gets passed over and they just decide to leave the company and go somewhere else? Is that ever a concern?
Yes, it is. And it actually happened. And it actually happened when I was moved into leadership. At the time I was moved into my leadership position, there was probably 2 or 3 other individuals that were right around my age and were also wanting to move up into a leadership position. So we were a lot smaller then. We were about half the size than we are now. So yeah, we had a couple key people leave because they just thought, with me being the age I was when I was moved up, that there was nowhere for them to go. Had they stayed, we've now grown and there's been other opportunities that they could have moved into. So one piece of advice I would give to people, just because you didn't get the position you were going for, doesn't mean that there's not another opportunity for you right around the corner. So it was a shame to see them move on when they would have gotten into a leadership position eventually. And they were good people and we hated to see them leave. So the way to avoid that would be to have that discussion with them and just really tell them, hey, look, we appreciate you applying for the position or trying to prepare yourself for the position. We think so-and-so is the best candidate, but it doesn't mean that we're not still looking at you for future opportunities. And I think it's important that senior management has that discussion with those individuals, because if not, they may get discontent and they may leave, and you just don't want to lose those key people for just not communicating that to them.
Yeah, that's key. It's interesting how you mentioned that Inland Empire opportunity that you expanded into, you tried, it didn't work, but that was one strategy, it sounds like, to give people opportunity to grow in the company.
It definitely was. I mean, we were operating out of our Santa Fe Springs office just fine, but we thought, let's give someone an opportunity and get people out there and let's grow the company organically. And we have other successes where that has happened, the right people in place, but that was just an example where it didn't.
That's excellent. Now, Griffith is an ESOP, and like you said, it's interesting. I thought it was really great how, there was this 10-year plan to do the ESOP and it turned into 20. And obviously executing successfully an ESOP is not just something you snap your fingers and you do. But what do you think is the main advantage of structuring your company as an ESOP in terms of this succession planning and passing the company on through multiple generations?
Well, I think the advantage of being an ESOP is everyone of the company in some form or fashion. Everyone gets stock in the company. Everyone feels like they're an owner. It really comes down to when you're running a project or you're even in your office and you're trying to be as cost effective as possible, because the more cost effective we are, the higher profits we're able to secure on our projects, and that increases the value of the stock. So that tends to take care of itself for the most part. It really gets people bought into the company where you're, again, not just making money for one or two single owners, you're making money for yourself in the long run. So as far as succession planning goes, it's important for us to identify the right individuals to move into leadership roles in the future, because it's our job. I'm an ESOP trustee. We have 4 of them in the company total. And it's our job to make sure that we protect our employees' stock. And it's our job to put the right people in place that not only will maintain the value of the stock, but hopefully grow it. Our goal is to grow the stock. Even in the last 5 years, our stock has almost doubled. Because putting the right people in place and executing our plan. So that's why it's so important. And you want people that are going to take ownership of that when they get into those leadership positions. And they have, again, the stockholders, the employees' heart, in mind that, hey, I want to make sure that I keep this company successful. I want to make sure that I keep the company profitable. Because in the end, I want the employees that work for our company to be happy that they spent their career here and that they retired with a really great retirement from putting in the time they did with Griffith Company.
Why do you think, and you may not have a direct answer to this, but why do you think ESOPs fail?
I think they fail when, it is a big obligation. We're constantly rebuying the company when people retire. So when they probably fail the most is when you don't plan ahead. We're constantly looking 10 years ahead of who's going to retire, what our financial obligations going to be, and we're making sure to put money away to fulfill those obligations. Where companies get in trouble is when they don't plan ahead and they just think the money is always going to be there to pay those retirees. One benefit of being an ESOP is we don't pay taxes, because the taxes get paid through ESOP retirements when employees retire down the line. But if a company has a bad year, they wouldn't pay taxes anyway. But if an ESOP has a bad year, you still have to pay out your ESOP obligation. You can't defer that. So where companies get in trouble is not having money set aside to get through potentially some tough years and still pay out those obligations. And in this business, we all know they happen. It's a very cyclical industry.
Interesting. Do you have any experience when there's a talented person in your organization in whatever role they're in, but somehow they're not a fit for your company? Have you ever had experience with that?
Yeah, we have. I have. We've had people in the company that are very smart individuals. They have a pretty diverse background on what they've accomplished and what they've done in their careers. But for whatever reason, they have trouble grasping what we're trying to accomplish. So, I guess a good example of that is there's some really talented civil engineers that are very technical and very smart at the work product that we're putting out or that we're designing or constructing, but they really struggle, Eric, with the business side. Their mind is so technical with engineering, but they really have a struggle picking up the accounting, the business piece, the legal side, the negotiating side. They don't have the whole package, so to speak. So we've had that happen on a few occasions. So
does that emerging leaders program, does that help you to kind of filter out some of the folks who may be more technical minded and not able to grasp some of the business side of the equation?
It does. Yeah. So through that process, we can see them in action early on, see again who rises to the top, who struggles with certain aspects of what we're trying to teach them. We can kind of really weed those, maybe even not weed them out, but decide who's stronger and who's more well-rounded and who's ready first for a position versus someone that may take a little more time or frankly may just not ever get there. They just may not be able to grasp some of those concepts because their mind doesn't think like that.
Okay. What differences, if any, do you see between the folks who are now in their 20s and 30s and folks who are more in their 40s to their 60s. Do you see any big difference there?
I mean, there's definitely a difference. The younger generation's a lot more tech savvy. They like to communicate a lot more digitally versus, face to face or, even via phone verbally. Their communication is a lot different, but they're very effective in their own way. Whereas the older generation is used to having a face-to-face meeting or having set agendas when they go into a meeting or just being very structured in how we approach different problems. The work ethic's a little bit different. I mean, the older generation believed in putting in really long hours, and the more hours you put in, the more you were going to learn, the more you were going to get done. Whereas the younger generation seems to be a little bit more efficient on how they get things done. And they don't believe in putting in the same hours, but they still seem to be very effective in getting things done in the time that they are willing to put the work in.
What is your next step in your career?
So for me, our CEO probably has about 8 to 10 years left before he wants to retire. So I'm going to continue to put the building blocks in place to, shore up our different work groups. My path is to take over for him when he retires in the next 8 to 10 years.
How does that sit with you? Are you comfortable with that, the expectations that are on your shoulders perhaps, or the way that others in your organization may regard you?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of respect of all the people in the company. I can't say there's anyone that wouldn't think I'd be the right fit to be in that role in the future. As far as myself goes, I look ahead to that day. I continue to learn and get better and try to make sure that when that time comes that I'm ready. I feel like I'm on the right path. And, one of the things I've done that was really helpful as well, I have been a part of a couple of CEO roundtables.
Oh, good.
Where I was able to learn from other CEOs and other senior leaders in other companies and really pick their brain because, again, my experience is only Griffith Company. I've only been here. So it's good to get other perspectives and, again, just keep learning. And I mean, I don't care how much experience you have. Every day you're going to learn something new. So the more I can do that and prepare myself for that, then I'll make sure that I'm ready for that next role.
It's interesting because, you've got a nice long window there. I mean, that 8 to 10 year window. What would you say are one or two things that you're focusing in on the next 2 to 3 years in terms of improving your contribution?
Well, one of my big tasks that I have to ensure is that I identify my successor. So I have to make sure that I have my successor identified. And I have a couple individuals that I'm looking at and trying to help get them ready. But obviously, I can't move into that next role if I don't find my replacement. So that's one of the big things that I'm working on in the next couple of years. And literally the next 2 to 3 years, I have to have that person identified and have them ready to move into my role so we can start the succession planning towards that direction. And the other one is really just continuing to learn being able to take on that responsibility. I mean, being the guy at the top, your decision is the ultimate decision. Whatever you decide to happen is ultimately what happens. So, preparing yourself from a mental standpoint to be able to sleep at night and to stand behind your decisions is key. So I think just really that mental preparedness is really important. The technical or the business side of things, I mean, I don't have any doubt in my mind that I won't get to that point, but I'm learning a lot of that now, or I have learned a lot of that. So it's really working on that, just the mental preparation and then really finding my successor. Tell
me just a little bit more about that mental preparation. Specifically, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's beginning to put yourself in that mindset that when something happens, I can't go to the guy above me and say, hey, what do you think here? Or bounce that off the person above me. I've got to, I do have peers that I can bounce things off of, but ultimately it's your decision. And, as much as you try to make the right decisions, you're not going to be 100% right all the time, right? So you have to be able to live with the decision you make with the information that you have and mentally be prepared to know that you're going to maybe not always make the right decision. You have to live with whatever those consequences are. And also, be able to handle whatever outcome, whatever ripple effect comes with some of those decisions. Because, there's a lot of people that depend on you when you're in that role and their livelihood depends on it and their family's livelihoods depend on it. So it's a big responsibility. So it's just getting yourself prepared to make those decisions effectively and stand by them.
That's interesting. So taking full responsibility, being willing to make decisions and being willing to stand by the consequence of those decisions, whether good or bad.
Correct.
Yes. Oh, man, that's good stuff. So let me ask you this then. As you look back on your career, and I know you're mid-career, you've got a long way to go. If you were to start your journey all over again, what are one or two things that you would do differently?
Well, if I was to start my journey all over again, I would certainly get into this business a lot sooner. I would have hoped I would have been exposed to it earlier. And I think now as an industry, we're doing a much better job through Build California and AGC and other associations out there in the unions, really getting out there to the junior highs and the high schools and really exposing our youth to construction and what a great career it can be, whether it be in the trade side or in the management side. But I would have loved to get into this, in my late teens and go to school and either do a civil or a CM route. And the other thing I would encourage people to do early on is, as well, as get some business classes under your belt. This business has become so much more business essential versus technical. You have to be well-rounded to really run a project and be successful in this business. So yeah, I just got exposed. I got into it earlier and really got some mentors earlier on. And I would have had a few more years under my belt and I would have known even more than I do now.
That's terrific.
Would have done differently.
What would you like your legacy to be at the end of your career? What would you like your legacy to be?
I've thought a lot about that, and I'd like my legacy to be, when I leave the company, that I've left the company in the best capable hands possible, that I've set the company up for future success to the best of my ability, and that I've grown the stock for all of our employees as much as I possibly could. Again, I want the employees that either worked underneath me or worked for our company, especially for a long time, to look back and say, wow, this is one of the best decisions I've ever made working for Griffith Company. And wow, what a success it was for me. And have them never second guess that who they worked for or where they worked. That's what's really important to me. I want all of our people to be successful and have a very lucrative retirement before they leave, when they leave the company.
That's terrific. Ryan, I really appreciate your time here today. As we're wrapping up, I'd like you just to summarize or to give the audience, people who are listening, 3 specific action steps that a company should be taking in order to successfully execute a succession plan.
So the first step would be to put an actual formal plan in place. Without a plan, then it's hard to follow the step 2 and step 3, but put a plan in place, identify who your leaders are, identify when they plan to retire. Second step, when you have that in place, you identify who you're going to be replacing and when. Then you want to start identifying who the potential replacements can be. How many people do you have in your organization that possibly can get there, that you need to train and get them ready to fill those roles? And how many do you need to bring people in from the outside? Do you have enough talent currently inside? Do you need to do more training inside? All of that, all those questions will be answered through this formal succession plan. And then the third and one of the most important things is really just to communicate that to the successors that you're looking to replace, the folks that are leaving the company. Communication is key. And that's one other difference, Eric, with the younger generation. They want to know what's their path. They want to know where they're headed. They want to know what steps they have to do to get there. So I would strongly advise constant communication and basically helping to give them a roadmap on where you think they're headed, what you're identifying them for, and then helping them to get there along the way. And if you do those 3 things, then you'll be in great shape for ensuring that your company has the right succession plan in place and that you're going to be covered, for years to come. And you should be looking anywhere from, 5 to 10 years down the line. Outside of that, because there's 2 different paths. There's future succession. And then what do you do if something catastrophic happens? What if you have a manager and just say, God forbid, they get killed in an accident? Do you have someone in place that can fill into their role, or are you going to be exposed? Yep. So to me, there's 2 different, there's your backup plan and then there's your long-term succession plan. So those are some things to really think about when you're putting these plans together.
I think it's terrific advice. I really appreciate that. Final question. I didn't mention this before, but I'm just going to throw it in there. What's your favorite place? I mean, you guys are out of Southern California, right?
Yep.
Okay. What's your favorite place to eat near your office that you want to recommend for the audience?
This is easy because I just went there last night for the first time. We have a great restaurant right down the street from us called the Old Brea Chop House. Very top notch. The owner managed Morton's for a lot of years, and nice. Great establishment, top notch, great service, awesome food. So yeah, I highly recommend giving it a try.
Excellent. Old Brea Chop House. I see it. We'll put the links in the show notes. Great. Ryan, you've been very generous with your time here. I appreciate the insights. I particularly like the one about having 3 people identified for a position. And then in the succession planning aspect, making sure that you identify when folks are going to be retiring, identify the potential replacements, communicate that plan, and then start developing people. It's terrific advice. Very, very straightforward. Not easy to do, though. And so I think it's something like you said, you've got to get started 5 to 10 years in advance, and then also have that catastrophic plan or that backup plan in place as well. Really, really appreciate your time today, Ryan. Thank you for joining us on Construction Genius.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Eric. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Hey, this is Eric. Thank you again for listening to my interview with Ryan. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, if you need some help with your succession planning, feel free to reach out to me. First step you could take is going out to constructiongenius.com/succession assessment. And I've got a link in the show notes for that URL. And you can download a very short assessment just to give you an idea of where you're at with your succession planning at the moment. If you know that you need some help and you'd like to reach out to me directly to have a discussion about how and if I can help you, just go to my website. And there's a link in the description where you can book in a 10-minute conversation with me. So either way, take the assessment or book in a 10-minute conversation with me. I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. And thanks again for listening to Construction Genius. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.